Hey, and welcome back. It's the Scaling Secrets podcast, and we're here with Dave Korinek from Magnetic Creative. They are at mag.cr, and we are exactly in the right place to talk about scaling secrets because Dave has dedicated over 2 decades to bridging the gap between brands and their audiences. His approach fosters a culture of expansive thinking, motivating people and brands to strive for their best selves. And Dave has worked with VIZIO, Chili's, KitchenAid, Wall Street Journal, Kellogg, so many other amazing brands. So he has some things to tell. He has some advice to give. So Dave, glad to be speaking with you.
Yeah, great to speak with you as well. Thanks for having me on, Robert.
Glad to have you. And so we introduced you, but is there any gaps that need to be filled in what I just said about you there? Is there what makes you tick? What are you all about? What gets you excited?
No, hey, listen, I'm a problem solver by nature. So a lot of times, it's hard for founders or for ideators or operators to see, the forest between the trees. They're really focused on a product or a service or a brand that they've created. And it's my job to kind of weed out the madness and kind of figure out how to help them find the golden goose or the golden egg at the end of the tunnel or the rainbow. So that's really what my focus is. I've been through a lot of different industries, focused on a lot of different types of launches, but it's a process you got to go through, but it's exciting to go through it. And I think that's the way I always talk about myself is I work as a torchbearer for a lot of the brands out there. Like they may not know what's going to happen or what's coming, but I've seen it and I can help them navigate those waters together.
Wonderful. You get them to where they need to go. And so what do
Exactly.
we need to know about this subject? Like right before we hit record, you mentioned this idea that sometimes companies are in a rush to scale, or they just want to get to that finish line. And you say, well, hey, you need to get some of those building blocks in the right in place. You're not at the right point where you're set up to where you need to be to launch the rocket ship. So, I mean,
Yeah.
tell us about some of these problems such as these. Like what are
Yeah.
companies missing out? What do they need to know to be prepared for you?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think it's whether it's prepared for us or prepared for the market, whatever that may be. The main thing is, I think a lot of companies that I see that are challenged with it is they maybe have a good idea, they have a good product, but they really haven't gone and done the deep dive research that they need to do to formally position the company the right direction, right? Now, that might be just understanding, hey, what's our product viability? Does the audience want this product or service? Why do they want it? Understanding consumer intent and purpose behind why they might like this product or not. Is there ancillary markets to be considered? Who are we going after first? What's the there's so much to understand. You really try to. I like to look at it as like, what's the game plan, right? And you really don't want to run out and just try to go do something without really doing the thinking behind it. So I'm a big proponent of spend the time doing the thinking in the back end and all the planning so that when you're ready to go to market, you can go out with the gusto. Like you can really like know for a fact that you're going after the right audience. How do you know what ads to serve, where to serve them, why to serve them, what to say to people if you haven't done the research? And so for us, it's about building that core foundation before you really go out there to try and market something. I think there's a difference. You have to determine whether you're at minimal viable product stage or you're trying to scale your business. If you're just trying to get to minimum viable product, test it, do what you need to, find out what's working. Once you nail it, then you really got to get behind the scenes and figure out, okay, now we're going to drive this thing further. We want to scale it. We want to open up, other locations or go mass market, retail, online, going from D2C to retail, things like that. You really just got to do the back end work to make sure you're ready to do that. And that's really a big thing that I always say to people is, have you done all this back end work? Have you really know who you are and why you matter to your customer? Because I think sometimes a lot of brands take that for granted when they come to market. And then they realize really quickly that, oh man, we have such a great product, but nobody knows why they need us. you know?
So it seems like there's a couple of stages they need to go through first, right? Like you're mentioning about the like getting the bugs worked out and then figuring out what the plan is. So that way, when you start taking these actions, you know where you want to go, you know how far along you are. And what comes to mind are some of these things like how like Taco Bell they try it when they add to their menu. They're like, hey, we're gonna in just a few locations like test some of these things out, or like in like the book Good to Great, there's all these stories about how someone had a product and they got on a shelf at Walmart and then it was the worst thing that happened. It destroyed their business because they weren't prepared. So when you meet with these kind of up and comers, right, these businesses that are growing, and you say, hey, you're missing out this or that piece, like, is there anything standoutish that a lot of us need to hear about? Like, are they missing like key people or like a written plan or like funding? Like, what's the
Yeah.
number one thing that you see a lot of as far as these businesses not being prepared yet.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I see is, again, they may have a pain point that they've solved for. So they have a product that solves a need, but they don't do the stuff behind the scenes to tell, because you have to pitch it, right? Whether it's an investor or you're, I mean, I'm in Bentonville right now. We just had some Walmart meetings, and it is one of the things we do. You have to get yourself in front of them, and you have to tell the right story. I think people lack the ability sometimes to tell the story behind it. We invented this product or created this product because there's a need in the market. Here's why there's a need in the market. Here's what the trends are saying. Here's what's going on with consumers. Here's why this product is viable. We've tested it. It works. The responses are great. Now we want to put it in this, go to the next level. We want to put it in 300 stores, right? So retailers aren't going to do that work for you, right? They're there to help you get out there, but they will not build your brand or help you grow. Their job is merely to sell to the customers, right? So you have to come in with a true like understanding of the value of your product to your consumer that you're selling to, and you need to explain that to the retailer, to the investor, to someone in an elevator very quickly, and make sure that you hit it on point so that it's worthy of a scaling experience, if you know what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, and when I was younger, I either didn't notice the story as often as I should, or I like discounted the idea of adding the story because I thought that it added a lot of unnecessary fluff, right? I was too
Sure.
used to like when you write the fifth grade book report and they say it has to be 5 pages and you add all this kind
Yeah.
of things in there. But then in like now my adult years, I'm realizing, okay, well, the story is the way to like compress it. And when you have all this data or all these like facts and figures to say, you say, well, we have 8 things to tell them. We only have room for two. And
Yeah.
then the idea of having the story in like the beginning, middle, and the end, you can kind of like make it more interesting and exciting. And this idea of like hooking someone and getting their attention and
Yeah.
building the excitement, and then mixing the data in there just to
Yes.
kind of hit them on all cylinders. And so, can you like tell us about what's it like to get this kind of story figured out? Like we have all these amazing tales to tell, right? You've been at this
Yeah.
for all these years. Is there one in particular where you said, well, hey, we got this product and we have to figure out a way to, in a short amount of time, really sell it? Like what sort of story do you have to tell us about a story?
Oh my goodness. Okay, stories about stories. Well, so I'm a big fan of, again, I think there's an equation or a formula to this, right? And like any movie that's out there, there's something bad. There's some kind of there's some kind of conflict that happens, and you have to understand what the conflict is. Then there's got to be somebody that's the superhero or the hero of the story, and you got to find a way for them to solve this problem and overcome this so that you have conclusion. The person wins, hero wins. So I think for us, when I look at that, recently one of the brands we've been working with is called Nature Vet. They're a brand that's a product or a dog supplement, cat supplement for health and wellness of animals. And what we were working really hard with them is they've been around for about 30 years, and they were relying on this 30-year kind of storyline. But the reality is the market is changing, and that you're getting the millennial and Gen Z audience, and so that sort of 30-year presence almost made them feel old. And so what we really had to do was look at, how do we liven the brand up? How do we make it relevant now and into the future? We have the same great product. We have the same, great facilities that would make this like from scratch. They're like end-to-end manufacturing, super high quality, yet the story's been a little off. So we're actually still working on that right now, but to reposition them into the market and see what they're doing. But we just got back from Super Zoo and it went really well. Product, that we're launching some new products that are more like breed specific. And I think people want things in that category to be really tailored for them. And so we're listening and hearing. Taking a 30-year-old brand and finding ways to be relevant always is a really tricky thing. It's a lot easier to take a brand new brand and create a new story about it. And that's just one that we currently have worked on. A Ford is another good one too. We actually were working locally with Ford in a few areas and regions. And one of the big things for them was you'd get a Ford ad in the middle of Utah and it had a beach scene, right? And so we were talking about this. Gosh, we really got to localize this stuff. So when somebody's watching this commercial for a new F-150 in, Salt Lake City or something, that they feel like it's a place that they recognize and they get this connection point. Finding that connection. So we started doing localized content. We made ads that were local to the people, the residents of those areas. And suddenly more people were going into the dealerships. We saw a lot more interaction, a lot more engagement because it felt like they were talking to them. That personal, hey, I know that place that I see on this Ford commercial versus this big giant, global thing. So I think that personalization of that is something that's really important. People want to feel like you're connected to them, and that you speak in their language. You have empathy for their situation, or you know who they are. And so I think it's really important to get behind the scenes, really find those nuggets that make you feel connected, not disconnected from the realities of your consumer.
I love it. And this is all, I mean, at some point we've heard this, but I think maybe a lot of people have like ignored it or forgotten about it or maybe applied a little bit, but not enough. This idea of we need to listen, we need to personalize, and we need
Yeah,
to especially listen for those special golden nuggets because you talk to enough of your consumers, they'll tell you some of these things and you
yeah,
might hear them on repeat over and over.
yeah.
But unless you're like really kind of listening carefully and doing the work, then you might miss this sort of stuff. And so
100%.
as far as so you've done all these amazing things, right? You've worked with all kinds of industries, all kinds of brands. What are you currently struggling with and what are you working on?
Oh man, well, so I think for me right now, I'm in a little bit of a transition with the business for me because I'm being the founder and doing what I've been doing for so long. I'm finding myself sort of in a transition inside. I think you've probably maybe read or heard the book, The Founder's Dilemma. And I'm in that spot where we've built up this great agency. We can execute all these great things. And for me, my passion is really getting in like one on one with CEOs and the teams and trying to solve that problem together with them. So I've been shifting more towards that role where I'm almost, somewhat fractional, but I can come in from a brand strategy and like marketing perspective and really help companies grow and be where they need to be. But it's like that one to one connect. I think sometimes people feel like working with an agency is like disconnected. You get the B team or whatever once you sign them up, and it's not who you thought they were. And where for me, I'm looking for specific companies that I feel like I see the opportunity. There's a really nice ripe apple that can grow really well, and trying to insert myself into the business and really help to drive that growth of that company. And then when they're ready to jump into a relationship with our agency, then they jump into that too. But that's just something that I've been kind of working on. I'm a big fan. One of the things I've been spending a lot of time on is consumer insights, sort of ICP, right? What is your customer profile for your business? And what do they care about, right? And I think whatever you're in, I think most people that go out and do cursory research, so look for reports. But what we typically do, and I think is the most valuable thing right now that I'm shifting towards more, is I want to talk to actual customers that aren't yours yet. And I want to ask them all the questions I need to know from the consumer's mind, not just from what we think in the boardroom, as a group. But I want to hear what they have to say about the product or what the need is or why they care about the form factor, the things that they need to hear, what matters to them. If it's a food product, what are the buzzwords that matter or don't matter to them? Really just sizing up, most importantly, what is the need that the consumer wants and how do we feed that to them the right way? Because I think that's always the problem. There's a disconnect between sometimes the product and the consumer. It might be a great product, and I've seen a lot of great products not make it because it didn't make that connection. So when you said earlier, bridging the gap between the consumer and a brand, that's my job. I love the idea of, I say, people ask me what I do all the time. I said, my job is to put your brand in someone's hand, like literally like off the shelf and into their hand and create a conversion or a connection and also create long-term, fan base, of consumers. I think the best thing is not buying a product once, but coming back for it again and again. And that comes with a little bit of fandom. You got to create that, again, the storyline. You got to have a great product. It's like a no-brainer. Sorry, like I go back to that. If your product isn't right, you're not going to win, right? You can't have a subpar product and expect to win in the market when there's so many other products and competitors out there. You really have to focus on making sure your product is great first. And I think when you do that, then you can start layering and building on top.
100%. I agree completely that it's definitely it's old-fashioned thinking that some of these huge companies they kind of had a stranglehold, but then now I mean these businesses that have been around for 100 plus years going away, and
Yeah,
things move so quickly where it's like people have choices now, right? And people they can check reviews, and they also are perhaps somewhat fickle, and there's social media and all these other kind of new obstacles. So
yeah,
the foundations are not as secure as they once were, but that's good for those of us who want to step up
yeah,
and really shine and make a difference and stand out and all those other things. And so
yeah.
do you sometimes think about like how to scale but also keep the magic and the scrappiness, because I
Yeah.
imagine that you've gone through different phases, right? There's like you do a lot of the work, you hand it off, and at some point you keep rising until you're like what you're doing now, right? You're kind of the spokesperson, you're appearing on podcasts, but
Yeah.
you also mentioned there about not wanting to give someone the B team and about wanting to like apply the magic secret sauce. So
Yeah.
how do you balance those two ideas? How do you like achieve world domination but also apply the individual attention, or how do you also have your own fun and passion?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I think it's I want to be very purposeful in the stuff that I'm doing, right? For me, scaling these companies and watching them grow, like VIZIO TVs, for instance, was a brand that I worked with for a really long time. Just sold to Walmart for $3.2 billion. That makes me feel good about myself. I feel like an accomplishment happens there. And we watch brands that we're working with double their revenue and triple their revenue. When I say growth and scale, like seeing those come to fruition, it makes me happy, right? So I think I'd rather be like very pinpoint. I'm not trying to overscale myself where I want to do a really great job with the brands that we're working with. I think when I think of scaling, I think mostly about the brands that we're working with, and their success is my success. And I'd rather connect with certain brands that understand the value of what we're doing and be a part of it. I mean, I think as a growth point for us, I think one would be really cool is getting into a spot now where maybe a brand that I might work with, there's an opportunity for me to take a performance kicker. You know, if we scale to a certain point, then maybe there's a percentage of kickback that we get if they grow to a certain revenue or they ever were to sell. You know, I'd sure like to get a nice check from, you know, VIZIO for what just happened over there, but probably won't ever happen because that deal wasn't in place. But that's the kind of stuff I start thinking about now because the knowledge base is there. You know, of course, you know, that's my passion is I love seeing people successful in what they're doing. You know, I think a lot of times I work with investors a lot and operators a lot, and I see everybody's goal is to bring value to the organization. And that's my whole thing. I want to plug in and bring as much value as I can and as we can as a business. There's a point where my handoff is I've taken you to this right spot now. You're ready to get into execution and ongoing services mode where I'll pop in and out here and there to ensure that thread of strategy is continued. But you know, you just need to keep producing the right content and doing the right things and seeing how things are going, and we'll track that along the way. But I think those are the things that get me fired up. You know, again, there's nothing better than walking in and seeing a brand that you've worked on, you know, that wasn't in store, now they are in store, or seeing consumers talk about a brand that, you know, for instance, Next Grill is a brand that's in Home Depot. It's a grill company. When we first started working with them about 6, 7 years ago, they were a product brand, and we knew that right off the bat. They were kind of like a brand that was just within Home Depot, and nobody knew them as a brand. And we said we got to make them a household name. And now they're up in the ranks with like a Traeger and a Weber and a Next Grill all sitting right next to each other, and the consideration of the product is something in consumers' minds. That makes me happy. You know, like I love that, right? It's a great story to feel like we've accomplished a goal there. And now the growth will continue, right? But we've got to, there's levels of scaling. You got to remember, like I think always is I gotta hit there's a certain piece I'm trying to hit. And once I get there, then I can set a new goal. And I think sometimes people overshoot and they think they're going to go all the way to the end at the beginning. It's like, hey, I would like to have a logo that's as recognizable as McDonald's. Well, you have to take all of their years of, you know, being a business and being around and those golden arches. That takes time. You can't just do that. So I try to keep, I think, a level mindset when that comes to it, and just keep people thinking on short-term goals with a long-term goal in mind. But that's also big. Little wins equal the big win at the end.
That's huge. I love that. Is setting the right size milestones, because when someone does do that, when they have that humongous goal, it's like that's self sabotage, isn't it? They don't take that seriously. They don't think they'll get to that in one leap and bound. But if you kind of have those small achievable milestones, and you say, hey, we want to get more attention on Next Grill, we want to get sell more Ford cars to the localized ads. You have these realistic steps that
Yeah.
can be done. And so, as far as all these successes, wins you've had, do you think is there any kind of attributes that are unique to you? Is there one or two things that you think like really you do better than anyone else and is
Mm.
responsible for your success?
You know, I I think what I'm really good at, and what I've it's just been my role over the years, is really trying to find what that special something is about a product, right? I think I've learned a lot over the years, and it's funny. I've done this for so long that I'll sit in a room and listen to people, and there's a certain point where I'm like, I know what to do. Like I've got it. I mean, I still need to go the research. I still need to go do the things that we need to do to formulate a formal opinion about it. But I do feel like I know the points that I can push and pull in order to push a brand to where it needs to be. And again, there's a little bit of a formula, but it's also just experience and doing it. You just learn what works and doesn't work, right? And every product's different, every industry's different. But I think the successes that have worked really well, again, I just in the beginning I can see where they're just missing this little something. And if they just did these things, here's where they could go. And so again, those are the brands I get most excited about. But I think that's my superpower, is really kind of learning and seeing a brand and helping them articulate a better story. Brands have a really hard time, especially owners and operators or entrepreneurs, really hard time articulating their story. It's very rare to see someone go, well, let me get you excited about this product by telling you a story. And I think one of the ways I'll explain it is like with Next Grill, for instance. A grill is just a giant box with heat in it, right? And we put food on there, we cook it, it's very primal, and then we make the food. And now if I just sold you this product of, hey, here's this grill, it cooks great food, it's got this, if I focus on just the features of it, and it'll cook at a certain temperature, it's got this many burners and this and that, it's like, okay, cool, I may need that product. But if I start telling you about, listen, this grill, there's something great about it. The way that you can cook on it reminds me of the way that I used to cook with my grandfather. The way he made his steak and seared it off, and there's this family recipe that we use. You have to have it just right to do it this way. Like food with a story just tastes better. So it's instead of telling somebody what the recipe is, you need to sell them on why the food tastes great, right? What's the story behind it? And I'm making that a sort of analogy behind your brand, right? The food is your brand. How do you sell it to me that I want it? I create demand. And I think that's the people who miss that opportunity. Like they think in their head, oh, my product's so great and I got all these great things. But I always ask the question, why? Why? Because and I take it from the consumer's perspective. I'm always looking at from the customer's perspective. Why does that matter to me? Why does that matter to me? And at some point you keep asking why, you get to like, that's why it matters. Let's stay right there. Let's find a way to build a story around that, because that's what people care about. So I think that in its essence is really the key to success with brands and building brand equity, awareness, and longevity, right? I want to build something that's got sustainable growth for the future, not just a one time shot in the pan, like we're going to sell some product and then we're out. I want to build brands that can last a long time. Like you said, I think you talked earlier about, good to great, or something that's built to last. I really believe in that mentality. Let's build something that's worthy of being here 10 years from now, right?
Yeah, and that's a good formula there to kind of we can apply the logic and the intuition, right? The logic piece of it is you say, well, what's the empathy I need to have, and you keep asking the whys to kind of generate more of the information. But then the emotion, the intuition is when you say, okay, there we go. Now we're pulling on the heartstrings, right? Now we're having the story about the grill. It's like how the commercials for Disney say, hey, you only have X number of years left with your kids, right? Like before you know it, they'll be grown up. So go to Disneyland. They don't tell you about how like there's like metal and concrete in the park and it's this square footage. They're like, hey, you don't care about that. What is it that kind of gets you excited or that kind of goes the other way? And so whenever you deal with a company that when you ask them, like you mentioned earlier about like when you ask them these questions, right? Like, what are you all about or what gets your customers excited? When they know, you can tell they've thought about this like
Yeah,
every few years at least, and they've exhausted a
yeah,
lot of other 98 out of the 100 possibilities of what the answer could be. And it's just like that's what I think it's a good lesson what we need to do, right? Be keeping in mind about the story and about the brand. And since this is a podcast here, Dave, a podcast is a fun place to talk about errors and mistakes, and there's no way that you've accomplished all that you have without a
yeah,
few like missteps along the way. So does anything come to mind
yeah.
as far as like the past catastrophic failures, or was there ever a moment of stress where you felt like giving up? Anything like that come to mind?
Oh man. I mean, sure, of course. Like, I mean, that's the growth factor, right? For yourself. I think individually, you mentioned earlier, I think growing as an individual and as a business and as a brand, you're going to go through those failure points, right? And I think we've just come to realize you got to be honest with either the brands or yourself around certain things. Like there's been categories maybe that I've worked in, like man, like I just don't really. This isn't my like area of expertise, or I don't really, if here's what I'll say, the failure would have been maybe a product in the past that I didn't necessarily believe in. I didn't really think it was going to work, and I tried to help them still. And then it got to a point where the product launched and it didn't do well, and I just said, man, I should have just said it. I should have said, I don't think this product's going to work. And so it's got me to be more honest earlier on, and that's something I've learned about, when I speak with people, is I'm trying to find the reason this needs to be there, right? This reason it needs to exist in the market. And those little nuggets, like, I think honesty is the best policy. I think having straightforward conversations and saying, I just don't know, this is the right, maybe if you twisted this or tried this, let's run a survey, let's do some data points to see if this even makes sense before you go spend $1 million to build this thing out. Let's make sure. So I think that, to me, was a big lesson that I had to learn, is I can't help everybody, and also if people are stubborn or they don't want to give in to the doing it the right way, they want to cut corners. I've tried to help people do that before, and it's like, no, we don't need to do this. Let's just do creative. Like, let's just build the brand. It's like, well, I can't guarantee that that's going to work. And it's sort of an irresponsible way to approach building your brand or your company. And so I just know it's like, there's a certain way to build a house, right? And you learn in the past, people probably built houses the wrong way. They may change materials or whatever, but there's still a foundation. They still run pipes. They run all the electrical. They have to stabilize it, make sure it's approved by all the engineers. And that way that house will be there, and they can guarantee it'll be there for years. I look at brands the same way. It's like, you have to really formulate that foundational steps that make a brand successful. And if something looks wrong in the plans, you got to talk about it. And that might be like, there's a product flaw, and you got to hit on it. And I might not be the product guy, but I'm going to tell you, something about this doesn't feel right to me. So I would say we should test this and talk about it before we go too much further.
So it seems like there's basically two huge ways to go wrong, right? One is having that client that just wants to change too much, or you're not on board. And we've all had clients like that, right? Where they have a problem for every solution is what they call it, right? Where you say, hey, here's the foundation, here's what we should do. And they want to change all this stuff. And it's like, no, and it's fine to, like, work on something together, but it's yet another thing when they're like pulling pieces out of the foundation of the house and it's not working. And you're saying the other way to go wrong is when you yourself do not believe in what they're doing. And I mean, it is possible to be convinced, right? You talk to the customers, do the surveys, get the data. I'm sure you've had situations where at first you weren't sure, but once you learned enough about their product and their company, like, okay, now I believe in it. But if you still don't believe in it and you try to fake it, then you can't get to that empathy, right? And you can't figure out like what will work, because you're just, it doesn't compute in your own head. So I think those are two very helpful lessons. Are they on board, and are you on board? And so, we've shared all kinds of cool stories and all sorts of fun marketing and branding lessons. And so if someone here is listening to this podcast and they say, okay, I need to check out Magnetic Creative and Mr. Dave Korinek and find out how he can help me. We know that you're not for everyone. So how does a company or a founder or someone know if you are the person to talk to, and why should they be reaching out to you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think track record's important, and seeing the type of brands that we brought to market is good. You want everything to be a good product fit from a whether you want the right people behind and driving your brand. So I think having an honest conversation about the products, having a conversation what you're trying to do, there's got to be I would say a vibe check with everybody, right? And you might sometimes founders or operators have a certain way to go about things, and that might not be the way that I work or we work, and I can try to help them. But I think it's really important. You got to have the vibe. You got to have that conversation together. If there's a comfort level there, because that's, to me, the only thing that works. You have to trust me. You have to trust our ability to do what we're saying. And if I don't earn that trust with you and you don't believe in what I'm doing, then you're going to be guessing, second guessing. But I think truth in love, or truth in experience, is important. Like, you got to trust the process. We know that it works. Look at what the proven capabilities have been in the past and the brands that we've won for. And it's like, if that's the kind of success you want, and we can agree that we found the right product in the right place at the right time, and this thing's going to work, then, I mean, if I tell you I think a brand's going to work, it's got a good shot, But I think you got to be really careful with other people that just are sort of yes men or yes people. They say everything's going to work, and I'm just a realist when it comes to it. I want to be honest. I want to be. I'm caring about it. I want to talk through to see that, is this the right type of problem we're trying to solve with the brand. And so if that's what you're looking for, I have empathy for entrepreneurs. I'm a serial entrepreneur myself. So I've been through that. Again, I would say in a lot of ways, I've been through those before. As my role in the world, I'm a torchbearer. So my job is to guide and direct people on the path and help them get the right place at the right place to the right location in that X on the map that they're trying to reach. And if I don't think I can do it, I'll tell them. I think that's what you want out of a partner in something like this, is someone that's willing to tell you the truth.
100%. Life's too short to do it any other way, right? To not have that right fit and try to force it, make it work. And in this day and age, with the LinkedIn and the the AI, there's no reason to not like find that person, right? And as you mentioned earlier, different companies are at different stages, different sizes, so it just they might not be there yet. Or they might be exactly in the right position and they need you to get to that next level, because the Magnetic Creative Branding Marketing Agency builds brands and accelerates growth every day. So what's the next step call to action here? Should people go to magneticcreative.com, or is there a more logical location to go to?
Yeah, look, if they want to chat, I'd say hit me up on LinkedIn. It's just Dave Korinek at LinkedIn. I've got some great content out there, talks a lot about topics that matter and the things that we're talking about today. Or go through the website if you have a project, a specific project. But I'd say let's get connected, have a conversation. Like, I'm happy to jump on and have an intro call and chat with just about anybody. I love doing this. It's like my passion for life is to build brands and make things and create products in the world that matter. And so I'd love to have a conversation with people. So I just say reach out via LinkedIn, hit me up. I'm happy to set up a time and chat and see if it makes like a good fit.
Fantastic. It takes 15 seconds to do, right? They
Yeah,
find Dave Korinek on LinkedIn. That last name is Korinek. You go and click the message button. You say, hey, Dave, you got time for a chat? Company is this, problem is this. Maybe you can help with that. Boom, send, done.
uh,
And people I think sometimes people they watch podcasts or YouTube and they think it's like TV. It's like, no, you can reach through the TV and Mr. Dave is here, but
yeah,
he's a real person and he can talk with you right now today and set up that call and talk about goals and dreams and your company and growth. So that's mag.cr if you feel like going on the website and browsing around. But what Dave really wants you to do is reach out to him specifically. That's Dave, Korinek, on LinkedIn. Send that message, set up the call, have the conversation, see what can be accomplished when you work together. And we'll see you there when you talk to Dave Korinek on LinkedIn. But before I let you go, Dave, you
yeah.
know podcasting, right? And you know how we love to have our little 60-second sound bites for the TikToks and the Instagrams and all those things. So this is the part of the show where I ask my guest about, out of everything they've learned, is there a fun, helpful quote or lesson that has helped you that can help us? What comes to mind?
A helpful quote. Let me think. I would say that the biggest was probably the Sun Tzu. It's the Art of War quote, and it's the strategy without tactics is. Let's see, hold on a second. I got it all mixed up in my head here. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat, and strategy without tactics, something like. I'm sorry, I'm getting that wrong, but
Uh,
um,
do we need to look up the exact
let's look at the
the
quote.
exact
I feel
quote?
you think I live by this quote, right?
We have it. Here we go. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory.
Exactly.
Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat.
There you go. I haven't read the book in a
Nice.
little while, but I
So
love that one. Yeah.
and we need to both sides of it. Just like I came in and jumped to your rescue, so we both work together to get to that
Yes,
common
sir.
goal, right? You
Thank
need
you.
both strategy and tactics, and don't expect one to save the other. And so as we're thinking about that and thinking about the next steps of our business, go and find Dave Korinek on LinkedIn, and while you're at it, check out magneticcreative.com. And thanks so much, Dave, for stopping by, showing up, giving us some really amazing, fun stories, insights, lessons. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate you.